Have you ever found yourself in a situation where everything seems normal, even too normal? As if the silence was a little heavy, the air was thick, and the daylight, even though it was still there, seemed different? Paolo had this feeling when he went to pick up the used car he found on the internet, an offer for his son who had just gotten his license. It was supposed to be a simple transaction. He had seen the ad on Craigslist, the price was fair, and the pictures of the car looked great. The address? An ordinary house in a simple neighborhood. There didn't seem to be anything wrong. It was late afternoon when he left the house, with the sky tinged with shades of orange and purple. Have you ever noticed how the world seems a little strange at this time? When the sun is almost setting, but it's not really night yet. The shadows get longer, and the colors seem duller. It was in this environment that Paolo drove through the quiet streets until he reached the house in the ad. He parked in front of the house, but something immediately bothered him. There was no car in front. The house wasn't exactly what he had imagined. Sure, it was a regular house, but it was worn out, as if no one had lived there for a long time. The garden was unkempt, overgrown with weeds, and the windows were covered in dust. The blinds were closed, except for a tiny crack that gave the feeling that someone was peeking through the other side. Paolo tried to ignore the shiver that ran down the back of his neck. Maybe the car is in the garage, he thought, trying to convince himself that he was being paranoid. After all, he just wanted to get this purchase done quickly. He got out of the car, walking slowly to the front door. When he got there, he noticed that the door was just ajar. Paolo frowned. That wasn't a good sign. Who leaves their door open like that? He hesitated, but he didn't want to go back without at least trying. He knocked on the door a little loudly and waited. Nothing. No sound. He knocked again, calling out, "Anyone there?" Still nothing. The silence was oppressive. Have you ever felt like silence was heavy? Like it was pressing on your ears, making the room more tense by the second? That's what Paolo felt. His breathing became a little faster, but he forced himself to continue. He pushed open the door, which creaked, revealing the inside of the house. The smell that came out of it was unbearable. Mold, damp, and that odor you find in places that have been closed for a long time. Strange, he muttered to himself, but he was already there, so he took a few more steps inside. The inside of the house was simple, but something was wrong. The walls were bare, with no paintings, no decoration. There was no furniture, except for a chair in the corner of the room. And that's when Paolo froze. From a distance, he could have sworn there was a person sitting in the chair. His heart raced, his mouth went dry. He tried to convince himself that it was just his mind playing tricks, that maybe it was a statue or a mannequin. But the more he looked, the more that figure seemed human. He forced his feet to move. With slow, careful steps, he approached the chair, trying to understand what he was seeing. And when he got close enough, fear took over his entire body. It wasn't a person. But it wasn't an ordinary mannequin either. It was a doll, or rather, a stuffed figure. Yes, stuffed like an animal, but it was humanoid. It was sitting upright, with its head slightly tilted to the side, its eyes wide, its mouth half open in a rigid, disturbing smile. The skin looked so real that Paolo had to hold back the urge to touch it to make sure it wasn't real. Every detail of the doll was frighteningly realistic. The clothes were a little worn, but they looked like they were from decades past. The hair, although dusty, looked authentic, as if it had been glued together strand by strand. Paolo felt a strong shiver run down his spine. It was as if he was in front of something that shouldn't exist, something that violated all the rules of nature. Who would do something like that? And, more importantly, why would they leave it there, in a seemingly abandoned house? Before he could process what he was seeing, he felt it. That cold shiver that runs through his entire body. The unmistakable feeling that he was being watched. Paolo froze, his heart racing. His eyes moved slowly, against his will, towards the window with the crack in the blinds. And then he saw it. On the other side of the crack, there was a pair of eyes. He couldn't see much, just a figure in the dark, but he knew that someone was staring at him. The eyes were fixed on him, watching every move he made. For a moment, he stood paralyzed, unable to think, unable to act. But then his survival instinct took over. Without a second thought, Paulo turned around and ran out of the house. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the empty living room as he ran toward the door, fear consuming him. He nearly tripped on the driveway, but managed to stay on his feet. He got into his car and started the engine with shaking hands, barely able to control the steering wheel as he sped away. The drive back home was a blur. Paulo couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror, as if he were expecting to see something, or someone, following him. Even when he reached his street, the feeling didn't leave him. He parked the car in front of his house, but remained inside for a few minutes, breathing deeply, trying to calm his still beating heart. When he finally got out of the car and went inside, Paulo locked all the doors and windows, pulled the curtains, and turned off the lights. He sat on the couch in the living room, staring into space, still trying to process what had happened. But deep down, he knew that that house, that doll, and that mysterious look were not things that were easily forgotten. Something was very wrong in that house, something that he could not explain. And even though he had escaped, a part of Paulo felt that perhaps it was not over. I hope you liked the story, because the second story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories. Imagine, in a small town surrounded by dense forests and mysterious hills, a boy named Lucas. He was a curious boy, always exploring and asking questions, and he loved listening to mystery stories told by his grandmother. But he never imagined that a mystery would find him. One night, Lucas was in his room, surrounded by his toys and books. The light from the lamp gently illuminated the space, and he was getting ready for bed. But suddenly, something in the air seemed to change. The atmosphere was strange, as if the world had stopped. The silence was so deep that he could hear his own heart beating. Then, without warning, a soft whispering sound came from the closet, which was slightly ajar. Lucas froze. It was as if someone was calling his name, but with a different voice, almost distant. "Lucas," the voice murmured, sending a shiver down his spine. With a mix of fear and curiosity, he got up from the bed and approached the closet. The door creaked softly as he opened it wider. What he saw was a deep darkness, and a figure stood out in the shadows. It was the silhouette of someone who looked familiar, but Lucas couldn't place it. "Who's there?" he asked, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. The figure didn't answer, but Lucas felt a chill run through his body, as if the temperature of the room had dropped. He hesitated, remembering the stories his grandmother had told him about spirits and things that lurked in the shadows. He remembered a story in which bravery was the key to facing the unknown. "With a little more courage," he said. "If you're my friend, show yourself." And to his surprise, the figure began to form, revealing a face he recognized. It was his mother, but something was wrong. Her smile was strange, as if she was trying hard to look happy, but her eyes didn't reflect joy. "Lucas, come here. I need you." Her voice was soft, but there was a strange resonance that made him nervous. Lucas took a step back, remembering his grandmother's words, "Not everything that seems to be is really what it is." He hesitated and, instead of approaching, decided to move away. "You're not my mother," he cried, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "My mother wouldn't talk like that." The figure hesitated, and the smile turned into an expression of despair. "Please, Lucas, I'm trapped here." Her voice now sounded more like a whimper. Lucas's heart raced. What did this mean? He was about to give in to fear when an idea occurred to him. What if this wasn't his mother? What if it was a spirit, or something much more sinister trying to deceive him? He remembered something his grandmother always said, "For every shadow, there is a light, and it is that light that you must seek." With a new sense of determination, Lucas decided to act. He remembered a ritual his grandmother had taught him to protect himself from bad energy. He had some salt stored in a box, and he knew he could use the light from a candle to create a barrier. "I'm not afraid of you," Lucas exclaimed as he ran to the table and grabbed the candle. He lit the flame and, with his other hand, sprinkled salt around himself. "Get away from me," he ordered, as the figure in the closet began to distort. "Lucas, no. I'm your mother. Come here, you need me." The voice now sounded full of anger, as if the figure was wearing itself out. The candlelight illuminated the room, and Lucas realized that darkness was approaching, but it was not alone. Heart pounding, he raised the candle toward the figure. "You won't fool me. I know you're not her." And as he said this, the figure began to writhe, as if fighting the light. Then, with a final cry, Lucas declared, "May the light protect me." He knew he had to keep his courage. And to his surprise, the candlelight intensified, causing the darkness around him to begin to recede. The figure tried to move forward, but the light was too strong. Lucas felt the energy within him grow, and he continued to repeat his words of courage, growing stronger and stronger. "I'm not afraid of you." Finally, the figure let out an agonizing scream and disappeared in a cloud of shadows that dissipated in the candlelight. Silence filled the room again, but now it was a safe and peaceful silence. Lucas fell to his knees, exhausted but relieved. He had faced his fear and won. The next morning, Lucas woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. He got up, feeling lighter and stronger than before. When he went down to breakfast, he found his mother in the kitchen, smiling and preparing something delicious. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" she asked, her smile radiant and genuine. Lucas looked at her with gratitude and a new understanding of the courage and strength he had within him. "Yes, I slept well," he replied, feeling happy. He knew that even though he had faced something terrible, he had learned that light could always overcome darkness, and that he had the strength to face anything that scared him. As he sipped his coffee, he held the memory of last night like a secret, a mystery that would make him stronger. Looking out the window, Lucas saw the bright blue sky, knowing that he was ready for whatever the future brought. And so, Lucas's story spread, and he learned that courage and love always overcome darkness. I hope you liked the story, because the third story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories. I hope you liked the story. Just imagine, the rain is falling non-stop, and the winds are howling, making the trees dance from side to side. It's a stormy night that seems like something out of a horror movie. And you're at your uncle's ranch, far from the comfort of the city. The house, with its wooden walls and antique furniture, has a nostalgic aura, but today it feels a little different, as if it were waiting for something. As you try to snuggle into a corner of the room, listening to the sound of the rain hitting the roof, the feeling that something is not right begins to grow inside you. The clock on the wall ticks, but the sound mixes with the drumming of the rain, creating a rhythm that seems almost hypnotic. Then, that's when you hear the first noise. A metallic, faint sound, as if something is being dragged. You try to ignore it, but it's impossible. It intensifies, as if it's calling you. What do? You get up, your feet making little noise on the wooden floor. The light from the flashlight you grab flickers, and the white light illuminates parts of the house, making the shadows lengthen and twist. With a little courage, you approach the window, and that's when the lightning illuminates the night, revealing a hooded figure. Your heart races, a chill runs down your spine. The man is moving towards the basement, and that's enough to make you run back to the living room. "There's a man out there," you shout to your uncle, who was sitting in a chair, watching the storm. He stands up, eyes wide with concern. Without hesitation, he grabs his rifle, and you feel a mix of relief and fear. What will he do? What does the man want? Stay here, he says in a firm voice as he opens the front door. You watch, tense, as he advances into the yard, the rain falling heavily on him. Your heart beats fast in your chest, and the adrenaline makes your head spin. And then, as you force yourself to breathe, what feels like an eternity passes. The weight is almost unbearable. What's going on outside? You wonder if you should go after him or stay safe inside. Deciding it's best to stay where you are, you sink into an old couch, feeling the dampness of the rain mixed with fear. After a few minutes that feel like hours, your uncle returns, and you can see on his face that something isn't right. He's not here anymore, he says, trying to sound calm, but the tension in his voice is undeniable. But I didn't like what I saw. The storm continues outside, and the feeling of danger doesn't go away. You try to distract yourself, but the uneasiness is palpable. Then, something at your window catches your eye. You stand up quickly, almost tripping, and when you look, it's the last thing you expected to see. The hooded man is back, standing there, his eyes fixed on you. A shiver runs down your skin. What does he want? And why is he so quiet? He seems to watch you with a strange interest, and you feel like he knows something you don't. Lightning flashes across the sky again, and for a moment, you swear you can see a smile on his face, a smile that doesn't seem human. Fear makes you take a step back, but you force yourself not to look away. "Uncle!" you shout, but your voice doesn't seem to come out the way you want it to. Your uncle appears in the room, but before you can say anything, the man disappears into the shadows. The room seems to grow colder, and the weight of the tension increases. Your uncle approaches the window, but sees nothing. "I think he's gone," he says, but you can tell he doesn't believe what he's saying either. Hours pass, and your fear turns into a strange mix of curiosity and terror. The storm shows no signs of stopping, and you begin to wonder, who was that man? What did he want? You try to distract yourself with a story your uncle has started telling you about the old ranch house, but your gaze keeps drifting to the window. The sounds of the rain and the wind are becoming an almost musical background to your restlessness. And then, in a moment of carelessness, you decide to take another look. When you approach the window, to your surprise, it is no longer the hooded man you see, but rather a doll, perched on the branch of a tree outside, with a blank, fixed stare. Which makes you wonder, when did that appear there? Did you see that? You ask your uncle, who was in the kitchen trying to calm himself with a glass of water. He turns around, confused. "What, my dear?" The doll now seems to be watching you. Its empty gaze seems to know all the secrets the house hides. Your heart starts to race again. You remember stories you've heard about how dolls could have lives of their own, and the idea that this could be one of them makes you shiver. "Let's go to the basement," your uncle suggests, his tone offering no comfort. "We need to investigate." The idea of going down to the basement, where you last saw the hooded man, seems scary, but the need to understand what's happening is stronger. With the flashlight in hand, the two of you descend the creaky stairs. The smell of mold and damp invades your nose, and the light of the flashlight reveals cobwebs hanging in the corners. You feel like each step echoes more than the last, and fear begins to mix with the excitement of discovery. Deep in the basement, you see something that makes your heart stop, a collection of dolls, all staring at you. They are arranged on a shelf, and their expressions vary from disturbing smiles to sad faces. What are all these dolls? What are they doing here? "These weren't here before," you whisper, and your uncle shakes his head. "I've never seen them." A chill runs through the room, and you feel the need to get out of there. But there is something holding you back. You approach one of the dolls, one that has a sad look on its face, almost as if it were begging for help. Then you hear a whisper, "Help me." The voice is low and echoes in the closed space, and you take a step back, looking at your uncle, who is now completely pale. The doll with the sad look seems to come to life, and fear takes over you. "We need to get out of here." you scream, and your uncle agrees, pulling you by the hand as you quickly climb the stairs. The feeling of being watched continues, and the idea that the dolls could be alive and waiting for something makes you run even faster. When you get back to the room, you notice that the environment has changed. The light from the flashlight seems dimmer, and the storm outside shows no signs of stopping. But the hooded man, where is he? A cold sensation runs down your spine. The doll that was in the tree is now in the room, standing, looking at you with a sinister smile. Are we safe? You ask, but your uncle doesn't answer. He stands still, staring at the doll, as if in a trance. You try to pull him away, but he doesn't move. The doll raises a hand, pointing at you, and a choked cry escapes your lips. And just when you think things can't get any worse, the other dolls begin to appear, one by one, coming out of the shadows and gathering around your uncle. You can't understand how this is happening, but you know you have to do something before it's too late. You remember a story you heard about the power of love and friendship. With your heart racing, you shout, "Go back to where you came from." And to your surprise, the dolls hesitate. The sad doll's gaze seems to change, as if it's struggling against something. You concentrate, willing them to go away, and suddenly a soft glow envelopes the sad doll. "Help me," it repeats, and you realize that perhaps it doesn't want to be there. You gather your courage and step forward, reaching out your hand. As your fingers touch the doll, a wave of warmth and light envelopes it, and you feel as if you're pulling something out of it, something dark that has been holding it back. The doll begins to glow brightly, and then, with one last look of gratitude, it disappears in a shimmering light. You feel a sense of relief. Tell me which story made your hair stand on end? Tell me which one you liked the most? Because in the next video, the story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories.